Maybe this is a new team for you, or maybe you've done this job for a long time. Either way, there are things that if we don't tinker with, we won't do our best job as leading creative teams and creative volunteers. Also, your team might be staff or volunteer. It doesn't really matter. If you've been given the honor of leading, there is a responsibility that comes with that honor. Andy Stanley says, leadership is stewardship, and it requires intentionality, and I really believe that. As a leader, it's your job to help set the expectations. It's actually like a responsibility that you have. That might be art direction, feel, deadlines, it might be the sound. Whatever your discipline in the creative field might be, you're responsible to set the expectations and then keep moving that expectation forward. Often when leading artists or creative people, this is best done via questions. What are we trying to create here? What do we want this to feel like? Who's going to use this piece? How are they going to use it? What kind of team do we want to develop? How will our volunteers feel about the decision that we're making? How does it impact them? Is this a helpful decision, a product or service that we're creating, or is it sideways energy? What will this cost us in both equity and resource? When this is all over, what do we expect the outcome to be? I think a lot of times one of the best questions we can ask in a creative team when leading a creative team is why? What is the why behind this project? What is the thing that we're going to come back to over and over again and remember this is the reason we're doing this? And finally, what's the win? Is there a win? And if so, if we don't define that win early, we are going to find ourselves oftentimes missing the expectation. So once the expectation's been set, it's important that we leverage the person and not the position that we're trying to lead. Take the time to learn what skills are from each member of your team or your volunteer team, and then start leveraging those skills based on the person and not the job. When we put people into opportunities to use or develop the things that are they're great at, they get excited and the product becomes better. It's important to remember that there is no right way. Creative people, they need space to work the way that best helps them achieve their desired goal. If you've set the expectation well as a leader, you shouldn't have to worry as much about how you get to where you're going, just that you get there. Let creative people be creative. You love the end result when they're their best creatively, and most of the time, when you let them do their thing the way that they do it best, you're gonna love what the response is. I think also leading creative teams and volunteer teams, it's really important as a leader to remember that you have to be a team member and not just a boss. You have to be willing to do whatever you ask your team to do. Sometimes that means we have to get a little bit dirty. Don't live on the wrong side of the line, but coaching and mentorship happens best when people know you understand what they do, why they do it, how it gets done, and the challenges that they're experiencing every single day. Another concept to remember is that you should offer suggestions and not mandates. Other people's opinion bring value to the creative process. Of course, there's times as a leader where you're going to have to make the decision, you're going to have to make the call, and that responsibility is on you. You're the leader. And so as much as possible, you want to allow your teammates to have buy-in into the process. It's also very valuable as a leader to use your experience to provide suggestions and then watch what happens. You'll be really impressed by what your team gets to do at that point. Another thing is that creative people oftentimes are their best when they're surrounded with a little bit of chaos. And I know as leaders, sometimes we try to prevent chaos. We try to hedge chaos a little bit. But sometimes chaos can actually be good when it's done healthy. So create some chaos in your team. Sometimes the best stuff comes out of the discomfort of being a little bit crazy. One way to do this is to kind of play with the chemistry of your team a little bit. Maybe add some other voices into the conversation or drop a few projects into the workflow at the same time and see what happens. Finding ways to create healthy chaos will challenge our teams to be better. Chaos often allows us to work on multiple projects at the same time, which is healthy for creative people. Our brains work in sprints, and the switching focus helps create new ideas. The key is being in healthy, crazy spaces. We can put our teams into areas that are not healthy, and that causes a lot of damage. Another idea is to force them to be on and off. On is easy. Show up for work, do your work, but as a leader, force your team to take time off. Time off allows them to be on when it's time to be on and off when it's time to be off. Another option is to don't stop making stuff. When creative teams are not making new stuff, they get bored. There's always innovation to be made, upgrades that can happen, new somethings. Find ways to put new stuff into our churches and our spaces. Remember why you joined up to create amazing stuff that shares hope, grace, and Jesus. Keep them doing that. Another important thing as a leader when you're leading volunteer teams or creative teams is to watch their tanks. You need to manage energy, passion, burnout, desire. Watch each person's tank and know that each of them has a different way that they process through things. So members of your team and staff and volunteers require different types of fuel. Fill them up and fill them with the stuff that gives them energy. You also need to know when, where, and how to lean into the first 90% and the last 10%. Coaching is vital to leading a creative team and to leading a strong creative team. Art is so subjective, and so right and wrong are not always black and white like they are in some other departments in our church. Know when to have the hard conversation, because the hard conversations are important, but even more are what we call at Crosspoint the last 10% of the conversation. Leaning into that real truth that lives in that last 10% of a conversation. It's usually the stuff that hurts a little bit, but the stuff that really works and makes great art. Another option is to promote honesty. Promote a safe place. Allow for people to be honest, because honesty really matters. Always remember that vision is mandatory. Creative people need to know the why as much as the when and the how. Cast clear vision for the why so they can work with purpose and passion. Unfortunately, a lot of times, the larger the talent, the harder the person is to manage. It's not an excuse, it's just a reality. Really great creative people don't always fit into the boxes and the procedures, the manuals, or the policies and systems that we have in our organizations. Don't lose hope. We need really creative people to challenge and stretch our organizations. But just remember that it's going to be a little bit different with them. Understand their buy-in. Creative people leave their fingerprint on everything they touch. Unlike anyone else in your organization, the stuff that they make is stuff that comes from really deep inside of them. And with each product created, a piece of the artist is attached to that. So tread carefully, but always be honest. Reinforce their wins. Protect them in their losses. And that's actually pretty simple. Celebrate creativity when it succeeds and protect them when they fail. Bought-in creative people will be inherently harder on themselves than you could ever be on them. Understand the importance of relationships. A lot of times when leading creative people and creative volunteers, we kind of fear the relationship a little bit. But invest. Then invest a little bit more. Creative people are going to want to feel like they're part of the process and not a part in the process. Care is much more about them personally as you do about the stuff that they make for your organization. Culture is really big when dealing with creative people as well. So create a culture that feeds creativity. Creativity is a muscle. It needs to be exercised almost every day. So make sure your environment supports your commitment towards creating great stuff. Build time for your team to dream, imagine, create outside projects, and coach towards creativity. What you coach develops. If you want people to be their creative best, coach them towards being their creative best. Ask them how they're doing, what is inspiring them, and what they're getting excited about. Andy Stanley has this quote, and it's amazing. It says, "We treat everyone fair, but we don't treat everyone the same." If you want the best from your creative team, understand that they are comfortable with fair, but they aren't going to fit into the same box of how you treat everyone else inside of your organization. They're unique by design. It's what makes them great at creating and innovating, and it develops amazing stuff for your organization.